So welcome to Math 10 Prep. We're doing Unit 3, Equations and Problems, Lesson 5, Multi-Steps Equations, number 2. So yesterday we looked at a variety of techniques or skills that are involved in equation solving, and so let's just review those quickly. We talked about the distributive property, where if you are looking to simplify your equation, you might have to employ the distributive property, where the -5 in this case multiplies through the whole binomial behind it. So when we do that, we would get -5 times 3x, which gives us -15x, and then -5 plus 3, or -5 times +3. So we can write that as plus -15, or you could write that as -15x minus 15. And so that's one of the steps that you might need to simplify a problem before you can actually get into solving the problem. Here, the next thing we talked about was collecting like terms, and in this expression we have 4x plus 6 minus 5, where we have two terms that are like terms and we can combine them. So 4x plus 6x, that gives us 10x, and I think I said plus 5, but that's minus 5. So we've simplified it by collecting like terms. The next piece that we ran into was where we had an equation and we ended up with variables on both sides of the equation. And when we did that, we had to collect the variables on one side of the equation before we could move into solving it. So here we're going to move the 5x to this side, and we do that by creating 0. We take the 5x, we subtract 5x. When we do that, that becomes 0, and here we subtract 5x as well. That gives us 7x minus 5x gives us 2x is equal to, and don't lose the negative here, -16. And then we could finish solving this, dividing both sides by 2 to create that 1. 2 divided by 2 makes 1, and that gives us x is equal to -8. The next thing that I really want to stress, and this is absolutely essential, when we come to an equation that looks like this, where we have a variable multiplied by a coefficient, so we've got the variable x multiplied by the coefficient 3, and then we have its adding or subtracting some constant. When we go to solve, you always, always, always must do your addition or subtraction first. We deal with that first before we do any multiplication or division. So we're going to create zeros before we create ones. So I've got plus 7. The opposite of 7 is -7, so the additive inverse of 7 is -7. So depending on how you do it, you can either talk about subtracting 7 or you can talk about adding -7. 7 plus -7 gives us 0. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. So we have 3x, we add -7 over here. 3x is equal to 19 plus -7, or 19 subtract 7, and that gives us 12. Now that we've done the addition and subtraction first, we can then do our multiplication and division and effectively create 1. So creating zeros comes before creating ones. And here we've got a 3. We divide both sides by 3. 3 by 3 gives us a 1, so we're left with 1x. 12 divided by 3 gives us 4. So those are some of the techniques that we used previously, and now we're going to add a new twist to our problems. And these are problems where we have fractions. Now, I'm just going to move this. We have this equation, 3x over 4 plus 1 over 2 is equal to 2 over 5. There are multiple ways to handle this, but I'm going to teach you one way, and that's to eliminate your fractions. So our goal is going to be first to eliminate the fraction. Okay, that's our goal. first thing we have to do when we try to eliminate fractions is determine our lowest common denominator. And in this case, we have 4 and 2 and 5 as a denominator. So the 4 and the 2 have a common denominator of 4, and then the 4 and the 5 have a common denominator of 20. So our lowest common denominator is going to be 20, and that's because 20 can be divided by 4, 20 can be divided by 2, and 20 can be divided by 5. Once we've determined what our lowest common denominator is, we multiply the equation by the denominator, or sorry, by the lowest common denominator. And so essentially, I'm taking and multiplying this whole thing by 20. And that means that 20 multiplies this term, so I have 20 times 3x over 4 plus 20 times 1/2, and that equals to 20 times 2 over 5. Think of these as multiplying fractions. So this is 20 over 1. So I have a 20 in the denominator, a 4 in the numerator, or sorry, a 20 in the numerator and a 4 in the denominator. That is a common factor of 4, and so I can reduce this by dividing the bottom by 4 and dividing the top by 4. So I end up with 5 over 1 is equal to 3x over 1. Well, anything over 1 is just itself, so I have 5 times 3x, which gives me 15x. Now I have 20 times 1/2. Again, if we think of it as 20 over 1 times 1 over 2, we have a common denominator in the numerator and denominator, or a common factor in the numerator and denominator, and that's 2. So I can divide the bottom by 2, and I divide the top by 2, and that gives me 10. So I have 10 times 1 divided by 1, which is just 10. Now I've got 20 times 4 over 5. So 20 times, I said 4 over 5. Let me just say that again. 20 times 2 over 5. There's a common factor of 5, top and bottom, so I can divide the bottom by 5, and I get 1, and I divide the top by 5, and I get 4. So 4 times 4 times 2 gives me 8. And so I've taken this equation with fractions, and I've totally eliminated my fractions. Now it looks like something that we're familiar with. And so once we've eliminated the fractions, we go on to the next step, where we solve the equation using all of the techniques that we already have. Sorry, I'll just correct my bad spelling there. Remember, as I stressed before, we do our additions and subtraction before we do our multiplication and division, and so we're going to deal with this plus 10. So it's a positive value. Its additive inverse is negative 10, so we're going to add negative 10. That creates a 0. We're left with 15x on this side. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other side, so we add negative 10. We can think of that as 8 subtract 10. You want to make sure that you're paying attention and don't turn that into positive 2. It is negative 2. Now that we've dealt with the addition and subtraction, we can go to our multiplication and division, and we have to then take the 15 and divide it by 15 to create a 1. So 15 divided by 15 gives us 1, so we're left with 1x, and I'm not going to do anything with this. It's a nice, perfectly fine fraction. We can just leave it in fraction form. let's take and look at something just a little bit different. And here what we have is an expression over a denominator. In this case, how we deal with this is exactly the same thing. What's important to remember is this is a binomial, it's one piece, and we deal with it as one piece. Okay? But we're still going to eliminate our fraction by finding the lowest common denominator. Our lowest common denominator between 2 and 3 is 6. So we multiply the equation by 6. So just like I said before, like we did before. Only this time I have 6 times 3x over, or sorry, let me rewrite that. 6 times 3x plus 2 all over 2 minus 6 times x plus 1 all over 2, or over 3, equals 6 times x. So again, that 6 multiplied each of our terms, and we have 2 terms on one side and 1 on the other side. Don't split this up. This is one term because it's over a single denominator, and this is another term. So here we have 6 over 2, essentially. 6 divided by 2, that gives us 3. That cancels and we're left with 3. So I multiply my 3 in, and I get 9x plus 6. Treat that as one piece. Now we are subtracting, and I have 6 divided by 3. 6 divided by 3 leaves me with 2. So I have, and I'm going to write this one down just like this for a minute, okay? Negative 2 times all of this, and that's equal to 6 times x. And the reason I wanted to do that is to make sure that we pay attention to this minus sign. If I treat this minus, if I just multiply the 2 through, like so, what I'm going to get is 9x plus 6 subtract 2x plus 2, but it's all in a bracket. That 2 multiplies it, and it stays as one piece, and we get that equaling 6x. So that when this negative is applied to this binomial, we have subtract 2x, subtract 2. Remember that negative multiplies through and changes the sign of everything. Just bring that first term down. So we end up with 9x plus 6 subtract 2x minus 2 equals 6x. Now we're in a position where we're going to add like terms. So we have like terms here, 9x minus 2x. So 9x minus 2x gives us 7x. And then we have 6 minus 2, which gives us 4. And that's positive, so it's plus 4, and that's equal to 6x. Now I'm going to collect like terms, or move variables. Essentially, I have variable terms on both sides of the equation, so I have to move my variables all onto one side. I'm going to create a 0 with this 7x, so I'm going to subtract 7x from both sides. 7x minus 7x gives me 0, so I'm left with just 4 here. 6x minus 7x leaves me with negative x. And now I'm not quite finished here because I'm not looking for negative x. I want a positive x. So think of this as negative 1. We want to then divide both sides by negative 1. And that gives me a positive x, and 4 divided by negative 1 gives me negative 4. And so my solution is x is equal to negative 4. Let's step it up one more taking it to the next level. So this looks a little more complicated, but we've already dealt with everything that we need to in this case. We've got fractions, we want to eliminate the fractions. But before I do that, what I want you to recognize is at this moment, this is one piece, and this is a separate piece, and this is one piece. Until we multiply those fractions through, that stays as one unit. But before we multiply it through, we're going to eliminate the fractions, which makes it much easier then to solve it. Again, we need to find our lowest common denominator, and we've seen this combination before, 2, 4, and 5, so our lowest common denominator is 20. We multiply each term, or when we multiply the whole equation, we multiply each term in the equation by 20. So I have 20 times negative 1/2, I'm going to bracket it like that, times x minus 2, plus 20 times 1/4, that equals 20 times 2 over 5 multiplied by 2 minus x. So now if I take 20 times negative 1/2, that gives me negative 10. And that negative 10 multiplies x minus 2. Plus 20 times 1/4, that gives me 5. And so 5 is equal to 20 times 2 over 5. So 20 divided by 5 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8. So we have 8 times 2 minus x. Now, again, by eliminating our fractions, we have something that we've seen before, and we can now simplify both sides of our equation. And we're going to do that by distributing this negative 10 over the binomial x minus 2. So we're going to multiply that in, and negative 10 times x gives us negative 10x. Negative 10 times negative 10 times negative 2 gives us plus 20, and that's plus 5 is equal to, and we're going to distribute that 8 the same way. 8 multiplies 2, and it multiplies the negative x. So 8 times 2 is 16, and 8 times negative x is negative 8x. Now, on the left-hand side, we can simplify again by adding like terms. Now we can simplify again on the left-hand side by combining our like terms of 20 and 5. So 20 plus 5 is 25, and we still have our negative 10x plus 25, and that's equal to 16 minus 8x. Now we are going to collect like terms on both sides of the equation. So we're going to put our variables on one side and our constants on the other. I'm going to, and it doesn't matter which way we move them, I'm going to start by taking this negative 10x to the other side, and I do that by adding 10x to both sides of the equation. Right? Do it to both sides to keep it balanced. So negative 10x plus 10x is 0. That leaves us with 25. And we have 16 minus 8x plus 10x, and that gives us plus 2x. Excuse me. We continue to solve by now moving all of our constant terms to the other side, and we're going to subtract 16 from both sides of the equation. And that leaves us here with 2x, because 16 minus 16 is 0, and 25 minus 16 gives us 9. Now that we've done our addition and subtraction, we can complete this solving for the variable x by dividing both sides by 2. So 2 divided by 2 gives us x. So we have x, and that's equal to 9 over 2, which I'm going to simplify this time to 4.5 because I want to solve, or not solve, I want to actually verify this particular example. I'm going to go to a new screen, and I just always go back to the original. That's negative 1/2 times x minus 2 plus 1/4 is equal to 2 over 5 times 2 minus x. So remember, when we verify, we take and simplify on the left side and the right side separately, and we test to see if it works out. So we substitute in our solution, and we solved x to get 2.5. So this is negative 1/2 times, sorry, I said 2.5, but it's 4.5 minus 2 plus 1/4. We do what's inside the brackets first, and 4.5 minus 2 is 2.5. And so I have negative 1/2 times 2.5 plus 1/4. And let's just pull out our calculators. And when we pull out our calculators, we can just enter that in. I'm going to take negative 1 divided by 2 and multiply that by 2.5. And then I'm going to add 1 divided by 4, or 1/4. So on my calculator screen, it's negative 1/2 times 2.5 plus 1 divided by 4. And that gives us negative 1. Now we do the same process here. We have 2 over 5 times 2 minus 4.5. So 2 over 5. When we subtract this out, 2 minus 4.5 gives us negative 2.5. And now we're going to do the same thing. We'll just take 2 divided by 5 times negative 2.5 on our calculators. So 2 divided by 5 times negative 2.5, and that gives us negative 1. So our left-hand side equals the right-hand side. Sorry, got my left and my rights mixed up here. Left-hand side equals the right-hand side. So x is equal to 4.5. Now, I want you to take time to do some practice questions. To practice these skills, it's absolutely essential that you practice. And go into your binders on page 225. You can do all of question number 1. Actually, do all the way to 1 through 5. So 1 through 5. Always checking your answers. With that, I'm going to say goodbye for now.